That was fantastic. Thank you so much, Sarah, for presenting such amazing wisdom from Oli and, and Elaine. And now we're going to move into an amazing.
That was fantastic.
An amazing.
Thank you so much,
duo.
Sarah,
I would say it's. We're going to be talking about what's within you, with the authors of what's within you, with David and Tom. And I think that you are already here, right? So please come on.
Great to see you.
Absolutely, welcome. We have been through 2 days of incredible wisdom around a big topic, the topic of belonging, and the topic of loneliness, and the topic of how do we create synergy, how do we connect. But knowing you both, because Dave is the CEO and founder and co-founder of No Barriers, and Tom is the chairman of the board of an amazing organization that I happen to know over the last few months, and now I'm sitting as well on the board. I'm so proud of that. But knowing you both, you are those human beings that really make people feel that they belong. And when you go through your wisdom, and you have that wisdom in this amazing book, I recommend everybody to go through it. There's different stages, and there are different ways to move through the ladder of life. And one of the elements, which is unique, and nobody has talked about this, by the way, over the last 2 days, is the concept of the rope team. So that's my highlight of one of those. But I'm sure that now you're going to go through it. But I just wanted to welcome you on stage and say thank you so much. You're amazing. And I'm sure that we are going to learn so much about you. So thank you, Dave. Thank you, Tom. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Luis. It's been a real joy to get to know you over the past several months. You know, we met Luis, Tom and I met Luis this past March at a time in our lives where we really needed to believe this mantra that Tom and I have been teaching for the past 20 years, which is what's within you is stronger than what's in your way. At the time, back in March, we had to cancel all of our in-person programming for thousands of people at our nonprofit. I was going through a mass round of layoffs as a result. I wasn't sleeping, I wasn't eating well, I wasn't taking care of myself, and worst of all, I had lost some hope. And in particular, I was really nervous about this big annual event we do called the No Barriers Summit that was supposed to be in the San Francisco Giants Stadium. And I met Luis in late March, and his energy was infectious. And he convinced me and Tom and our board and staff that we could reach a lot more people if we moved our in-person event that we've been doing for 20 years to a virtual event. And we could reach a lot more people than a stadium-filled extravaganza.
Yeah, Luis brought his unique combination of technical expertise, his experience, and his compassion for the challenge at hand, and really wholeheartedly gave himself to make our virtual summit a success. So this June event, that we had was a huge success, as Luis predicted. We had, well over 1 million people viewing from all around the world. And on the second day, we did this celebratory live look-in to all of the people, all of the teams from around the country that had worked so hard to make it a success. And I stood next to Luis and reflected with such gratitude for how this extraordinary man stood by us to both light the way and hold our hand through the process. So thank you, Luis, for being part of our rope team.
Yeah, well, today what Tom and I want to do in the next 15 minutes is take you on a journey to meet other extraordinary people who have shown Tom and I the way through the darkest times in your lives, a way to find hope and optimism and build your rope team when you're in your most difficult moments. It's a journey that Tom and I ourselves have taken, and that we're going to challenge you to take as well. And the journey starts, I'm going to share my screen here. The journey actually starts on the top of Mount Everest. So picture here is Everest. Back in 2001, There was a team of 21 climbers who accomplished an incredible feat. They put more people on the top of the mountain from a single team on a single day than any team in history. This is a picture of that team. 19 of 21 made it to the top. And what's perhaps even more extraordinary is that one individual on this team was blind, completely blind. Eric Weinmare, who's one of the co-founders with Tom and I of this No Barriers movement. This is him pictured on top of Everest. He arrived that day in this little brief moment of sunshine where the wind is whipping, it's freezing cold, you can barely breathe, and he had a moment to just sort of bask in the glory of this success. But keep in mind, he couldn't even see what was around him because he's completely blind. He enjoyed that moment for just a few minutes, and then he turned around and climbed back down the mountain. The storm was coming in after all. Just a handful of minutes to appreciate 7 years of training, a lifetime of mental preparation, and a feat that only 10% of Everest climbers ever get to the top. Time magazine described this in this way when they put Eric on the cover. They wrote, "There's no way to put what Eric has done in perspective because nobody has ever done anything like it. It's a unique achievement, one that in the truest sense pushes the limits of what man is capable of." Eric was going blind as a teenager, and he had some choices to make. He was most afraid as a teenager of being pushed to the sidelines. He wanted to live a life of adventure despite the fact that he was going blind. You see, when it comes to adversity and how we tackle it, there's an important principle to keep in mind. And it's best stated, I think, in the words of Viktor Frankl, who wrote Man's Search for Meaning. And this is how he wrote it. Between stimulus and response, there is a space, and in that space, we have a choice. And our choice is our freedom. Eric chose to pursue the light of adventure at a time when his world was going completely dark. When I first met Eric over coffee after this extraordinary achievement, I found his accomplishment to be unfathomable. I wondered what I would do if I had had any sort of adversity as big as this in my life. I wondered how would I have responded. And I knew some adversity was coming, and so wouldn't it be better to be prepared? And it was under these kinds of discussions that Tom and Eric and I were having that we founded the No Barriers movement to help people who are in their dark times in their life still find purpose, build a rope team, discover a way through the adversity that they are facing, and actually not just get over the adversity, but use the energy in our challenges to catapult them forward.
That's right. And, you know, Eric's summit of Everest is this perfect example of the power of a rope team. You know, we talk about the rope team, but what we mean by that is this group of people that you trust who are linked together to encourage each other forward on their journey. It's this support team of people that you can't live without. And while the name comes from the world of mountaineering, it really speaks to this critical responsibility that we have to one another to make sure that we're caring for one another and making sure that even non-mountaineers, ordinary people like Dave and I, are always there for each other. And, you know, Dave and I, we've known each other for a long time. We've known each other since we were 12. And so you could say that we've always been on each other's rope teams. But the truth is that the rope has been made tighter through some unusual sometimes, but always trust-building trials. So one summer during college, David working at the Cincinnati Zoo, and he invites me to make a visit. So I go visit him, and he walks me into an enclosure. And what I mean by that is not where, like, you know, the people watch the animals from like everybody else, but he actually takes me inside an enclosure. And he disappears for a few minutes, and he comes back with a full-grown cheetah. Yes, a full-grown cheetah. Now, Dave knew that I was terrified by most animals larger than a microwave oven. So I almost passed out when I saw the cheetah. But he has the cheetah sit down next to me, and then he says some words that I'll never forget. He says, "Tom, I want you to pet the cheetah." No way! But he grabs my shaking hand and takes me to pet the cheetah. And as my shaking hand is touching the cheetah, I start to realize something. I'm feeling the muscular frame. I'm feeling the fine, soft hair. And I'm realizing that the cheetah's heartbeat is calmer and slower than my own. And I started to get comfortable. But then he says, now, Tom, I want you to touch the cheetah, her tongue. I want you to touch the cheetah's tongue. And so he caresses the mouth of the cheetah. The cheetah extends her tongue. And he takes my shaking hand back to the mouth. And now I'm caressing the tongue. And he says, what does it feel like? And I tell him, it feels like sandpaper, Dave. But that's not the end. He says, now I want you to touch her teeth. Oh my gosh, no way. And he takes my hand into the mouth of the cheetah. But just then, the cheetah's tail starts slapping against the ground. But in the calmest of voices, Dave says, we are going to slowly remove your hand from the cheetah's mouth. And that's what we do. And my hand emerged, 5 fingers all intact, and a newfound level of trust in Dave. Well, 15 years and 1 pet cat later, I'm on a business trip. And I get a call, the type of call that no one ever wants to get. My mom had suffered a massive stroke. I caught the next flight home and I rushed to the hospital. And as I entered her hospital room, my legs crumbled underneath me and I kneeled at her side. This woman had been the brightest light in my life. And now she was gone. Dave immediately flew in to support me through what was the toughest week of my life, helped me regain my footing, and ultimately take some steps forward. Soon after he returned from his visit to help me, he and his wife were at the 22-week appointment for their second child on the way. At that appointment, the doctor informed them that there was no longer a heartbeat. Because how far along the pregnancy was, they needed to spend the next day at the hospital to go through the delivery process, which only compounded the emotional suffering. Even in the womb, this child already was so loved by Dave and his wife. Now they had to unexpectedly say goodbye, all within a 24-hour period. Dave and I have spent years teaching and writing about this concept of rope team, but now we were forced to live it. A framework for breaking one's barriers in life can be somewhat esoteric until adversity just smacks you right in the face and brings you to your knees. And that's where we were at. We decided to get together to take a break from our jobs and our families for a short period of time. And while our suffering was different, our compassion for one another and our desire to help each other heal was the same. So we got together, we told stories, we did some hiking, and we learned to laugh again. And we discovered that while these activities were rather ordinary, our healing was significant. And our rope grew super, super tight during that time.
And Tom, it was, in that moment where we had to try to envision this world that did not yet exist. And we were struggling to figure out, what are the steps you take to get through these dark times and still have hope and optimism and happiness and have a rope team. And it was in that moment that we remembered another superhero, Mandy Harvey, that perhaps everyone listening may know. I'll bring up my screen. This may jar your memory if you're like, where's that name from? Mandy was a performer on America's Got Talent in 2017. And when Simon Cowell hit the buzzer that sent her immediately to the finals, 500 million people around the planet were in tears. You see, Mandy, in addition to being such an incredible singer with perfect pitch, she also happens to be deaf. But the leap from Mandy Harvey, this aspiring musician, to Mandy Harvey, the global phenomenon, may not be as big as you would at first imagine. As Lao Tzu, the founder of Taoism, says, the journey of 1,000 miles is a single step. And as Mandy tells me, it's 3 steps forward, 2 steps back, over and over and over again. When Mandy got into Colorado State University to study music, it was as if her dream had come true. She had been playing music and singing since the age of 4, and she had this tingling sensation that finally her dreams were coming true. But 2 months into her freshman year, as she was sitting in one of her classrooms, she realized she was having a hard time hearing the teacher in the front. She went and sat closer, still hard. Days later, harder and harder to hear. She went to an audiologist and discovered, to her great surprise and shock, that she had a rare genetic disease that was causing the nerves in her ears to deteriorate and that would cause the muscles throughout her body to deteriorate. 2 short months later, Mandy was completely and profoundly deaf. As you can imagine, Mandy went into a very dark period in her life. She dropped out of school and she lost all hope. Tom and I and Luis, we're surrounded by people who are at this point in their lives at No Barriers where they have lost hope. Veterans who are contemplating suicide, caregivers worried about the loss of their loved one, kids struggling with mental illness. And you would think when you're around all this pain and suffering that it would actually be debilitating and hard work. But in fact, that couldn't be farther from the truth. It is uplifting work, because what we find is that in our darkest moments, when all hope seems to be lost, that there is still something inside of us that we can tap into to get through it. And that's what happened to Mandy, thankfully. Mandy, months later, was sitting with her father, and her father turned to her and said, let's play a song. He signed to her because she couldn't hear. She said, well, we can't play a song. I can't hear my own voice. He said, let's just give it a try. And she starts playing the guitar and starts to sing, and she's watching her father's face, right? Because she can't hear her own voice. She needs to see what her father is responding, and she sees tears streaming down his face, and she thinks, oh, crap, I must be terrible. That couldn't have been further from the truth. He signed to her and said, you still have perfect pitch. That little glimmer of hope catapulted Mandy forward to her next big stretch goal, which was to play in front of others. She went and played at a cafe. It went really well. She played a full set at another cafe. It kept going better. She built a band. She learned to feel the music by putting her hand on top of the piano and playing music with her shoes off so she could feel the beat through the floor. Each successive success gave her more and more hope and confidence, and she built her rope team to get her further and further. And so when that America's Got Talent opportunity came up, she was ready for it. But that was years and years later. You see, one thing, when you meet Mandy in person, you'd be like, wow, how does this person have such extraordinary energy and hope? You fail to know, you don't see all the steps she took to get there. Every step you take matters, and it's the hardest steps that matter the most.
So true. And yeah, Dave, Eric and Mandy are these extraordinary examples of courage in the face of tremendous obstacles. And when you combine that courage with innovation, you can get through almost any adversity. So a few years back, this man, we're going to pull up an image of, his name's Kyle Maynard. He's a quadruple amputee. He showed up at our No Barriers Summit and said, I want to climb a mountain. In truth, we had no idea how we could safely get someone like Kyle up to a peak. But we are No Barriers after all. So we got our heads together with Kyle and we tried to figure some things out. So Kyle's biggest risk is his extremities and cutting his extremities. So we needed to protect the stubs that he has of arms and legs. So we grabbed what was available to us there, some bath towels and some duct tape, and we strapped them to his arms. And with this little innovation, Kyle proceeded to walk to the top, to bear crawl really, to the top of a 12,000-foot peak. But it didn't stop there. You see, Kyle got the climbing bug, and he set his sights on something even higher. So he teamed up with some experts in prosthetic design, and he transformed himself and his climbing style into something that we call Robo-Kyle. So with his new rope team and with his innovative new prosthetics, he was able to get to the top of Mount Kilimanjaro in Africa. ESPN made a documentary of his climb and awarded him an ESPY, and Nike featured him in their brand new campaign. Sometimes when we encounter a barrier, we often perceive it to be insurmountable, larger than life. But with courage, a few bath towels, and a roll of duct tape, you can get pretty far.
So the day after Eric, going back to the Eric story, the day up, he gets down to the bottom of base camp at Everest, right? And he's sitting there basking in the glory of his accomplishment. And his team leader, this guy by the name of Pasquale, he pulls Eric aside. And I'll just pull up a picture of this because I think it's telling. He pulls him aside. He says, "Eric, don't let Everest be the greatest thing you've ever done." Can you imagine that? Telling the guy who just climbed Everest blind, effectively, what are you going to do with your life?
You know, it took some time, but Eric soon realized what the deeper meaning of what Pasquale was trying to say to him was. And it's really the most important revelation in the quest to help people break through their barriers. We know that there are many tools, there are many strategies that can help people who are facing adversity. And we've shared some of those today through the stories of Eric, Mandy, and Kyle. But we have found time and again in our work with people of all walks of life that the single most important factor to help people break through their barriers is this: to have a purpose for your life that is greater than yourself. What Pasquale was telling Eric is that even though he reached the top of the world, Eric needed to find something to live for that was beyond that achievement, that was beyond whatever the next summit was in his life. He needed to find a vision for himself that was greater than himself.
So we'll finish here with reminding you all that we all have barriers in our lives, and we all have a choice to make about how we respond to those barriers. If you are ready to build a rope team around you that will carry you through your deepest and darkest times and to learn the principles to propel you through adversity, we invite you to join our workshop a little bit later today, to buy our best-selling book, What's Within You, to go to nobarriersusa.org and check out some of our online programs, or join us in person once we're able to do that. Once you commit to this work of building your rope team and tapping into this strength within you, we can guarantee one thing: you are going to discover a light inside of you. It's the same light that got a blind guy to the top of Mount Everest, a deaf woman to America's Got Talent's finals, and a guy without arms and legs to the roof of Africa. And it's what helped Tom and I through our darkest moments. It is this light that always sits there inside of us that will propel you through your hardest times and remind you that what's within you is stronger than what's in your way. Thank you so much. Thank you, Tom, for sharing this story.
Thank you, Luis. Thank you, Dave.
Thank you so much. Oh my goodness, so inspiring. This is, I feel so proud of being part of this rope team. Thank you so much for creating that rope, for creating that amazing process, for the inspiration, for who you are. You are just spectacular. And I know that this is making an impact into many people. Thank you so much. It's making an impact on me. Thank you.
Thank you, Luis.
Thank you.
Again.